Is debt counseling for me? Debt counseling is a formal legal process that provides for a consumer to be declared over-indebted and for the debt counselor to negotiate a restructured payment plan and obtain a court order confirming the new repayment plan. The debt counselor must be registered with the National Credit Regulator and have an NCRDC number. The NDMA uses the services of a registered debt counselor. Once declared over-indebted and accepted into debt counseling, the following will happen. You will be protected from legal action for a period of 60 days from the day of application and after the arrangement has been concluded, as long as you pay according to the new arrangement. All your creditors will have to stop calling you and liaise with your debt counselor. You will be listed at the credit bureau as being under debt counseling. For as long as you are under debt counseling, you will not be allowed to get credit until you are issued with a clearance certificate once you have satisfied your obligations as per the court or tribunal order and in line with the National Credit Act. The overall objectives for the debt counselor is to assess the full extent of your debt situation, assess your assets that may be taken into account, provide a debt remedy that provide you with an acceptable standard of living while repaying your debts according to your affordability. This includes retaining the home and a vehicle where possible. Provide you with an agreed, affordable and realistic monthly budget in order to resolve the situation in the shortest possible time. Provide a repayment scheme acceptable to your creditors and confirmed by the court. Prevent repossession of assets where possible. Rehabilitate you without detriment for the future, and allow you to get on with your life. The overall objectives for you should be to work honestly and openly with the debt counselor. Declare all assets and liabilities, including all incomes and debts, and including bonuses and salary increases. To pay the registration and debt counseling fees as disclosed at the first meeting. To adhere to the agreed installments and to pay these at the agreed dates. To keep in regular contact with the debt counselor for the full length of the agreement, and to agree and commit to the debt remedy. This may include surrendering credit cards, closing accounts and realizing some assets. The overall objectives for your creditor should be to work with the debt counselor to assist in the normalization of the debt, to favorably consider the repayment proposal, to ensure the consumer is assisted in a fair and unbiased way throughout the process of repayment, to assist the consumer to rehabilitate as soon as possible, and to assist the consumer to restore her credit worthiness as soon as possible. Before you visit the debt counselor, you will need to gather together the following documents. 1. Copy of your identity document, passport. 2. A copy of your most recent salary, wage slip. If you receive overtime or allowances that are not of a regular nature, then the last 6 months are required to determine an average. 3. Your most recent creditor statements and credit cards. 4. Your last 3 months' bank statements for all your bank and investment accounts. 5. Your last 2 months' credit card statements for each of your cards. 6. Your latest statement reflecting your home loan balance. 7. A list of other debts from friends or family members. If you and your spouse, partner share your income and expenses or are married in community of property, then 1. A copy of your spouse/partner's most recent salary, wage slip. If you receive overtime or allowances that are not of a regular nature, then the last 6 months are required to determine an average. 2. Your most recent creditor statements and credit cards. 3. Your last 2 months' bank statements for all your bank and investment accounts. 4. Your last 2 months' credit card statements for each of your cards. 5. Explaining the assessment process/outcome/a notification. 1. When a consumer applies for debt review, a debt counselor is required to inform all credit providers and credit bureaus of the application within 5 business days after accepting the application. 2. Within 5 business days of receiving this notification, which is done by means of a Form 17.1 sent to the credit providers and credit bureaus by the debt counselor, the credit provider is required to provide a certificate of balance, COB, providing the debt counselor with account information required for the assessment. This information assists the debt counselor to do an accurate affordability assessment, and thereafter provide an accurate declaration of whether the consumer is over-indebted. 3. The debt counselor should conduct an assessment in accordance with the NCA regulations to determine if the consumer is over-indebted and to determine the amount available to repay debt. 4. If the consumer is found by the debt counselor not to be over-indebted or not to be legally eligible for debt review, the debt counselor will reject the application and send a Form 17.2 to the credit providers and credit bureau, marking the paragraph that confirms that the consumer is not over-indebted. 5. If the consumer is found by the debt counselor to be over-indebted and legally eligible to be under debt review, the debt counselor should, within 30 days of the consumer's application, notify both the credit provider and the credit bureaus that the consumer is indeed over-indebted, and the debt counselor will inform all parties by means of the Form 17.2 notice, marking the appropriate paragraph that confirms over-indebtedness. Payment distribution agents. Once accepted under debt counseling, you will pay one installment which will then be distributed to your credit providers by a payment distribution agent. The PDA is also responsible for the provision of monthly statements to consumers and payment schedules to debt counselors, employers and credit providers, as well as attending to queries from the respective parties. As a consumer, you can choose to continue to pay your creditors directly and not use a PDA. If you opt to make direct payments, you should be aware of the following. 1. You remain responsible to make all payments as rearranged, in full and on time. 2. Proof of payments must be sent to the debt counselor on a monthly basis for record keeping and to enable provision of aftercare service, as a consumer cannot be under debt review without a debt counselor. 3. Consequences of making short or late payments, for example risk of termination by credit providers. 4. Debt counseling fees are payable to a debt counselor for services rendered, and this includes payment of aftercare fees. 5. For a debt counselor to issue a clearance certificate, all aftercare fees must be up to date. 6. Where the debt counselor has suspended provision of service, a consumer must provide proof of settlement letters from credit providers for a debt counselor to issue a clearance certificate. Termination, cancellation, of debt review. Under certain circumstances, a credit provider can withdraw a credit agreement from debt counseling, terminate, and proceed with legal action. Termination can happen if you default on your debt counseling payments or if your debt counselor does not finalize the process within the prescribed time limits. The Credit Amendment Act, 19 of 2014 determines that a credit provider is not entitled to terminate debt review after the debt counselor has referred the matter to the magistrate's court for a debt review order while the hearing is still pending. Clearance certificates. In terms of Section 71(2)(bi) of the NCA, a debt counselor must issue a clearance certificate, Form 19, if the consumer has fully satisfied all the debt obligations under every credit agreement that was subject to the debt rearrangement order or agreement. Once a clearance certificate has been issued, credit bureaus will be required to remove all the information relating to debt counseling, and you can then start getting credit again. The National Credit Amendment Act now allows you to finish debt counseling early after you have settled your unsecured loans and cleared your arrears on the home loan. It prescribes that 1. A consumer whose debts have been rearranged in terms of Part D of this chapter must be issued with a clearance certificate by a debt counselor within 7 days after the consumer has a. Satisfied all the obligations under every credit agreement that was subject to that debt rearrangement order or agreement in accordance with that order or arrangement, or b. Demonstrated financial ability to satisfy the future obligations in terms of the rearrangement order or agreement under a mortgage agreement which secures a credit agreement for the purchase or improvement of immovable property, or b. Any long-term agreement as may be prescribed. 2. That there are no arrears on the rearrangement contemplated in subparagraph I. And 3. That all obligations under every credit agreement included in the rearrangement order or agreement other than those contemplated in subparagraph I have been settled in full.